There is a place where three religions pray within a few hundred meters of one another, each calling the same ground holy. The old city of Jerusalem rises on a narrow ridge between deep valleys, fortified since the Bronze Age and reshaped by every empire that wanted to control it. Temples rose, churches spread, mosques appeared, and then modern borders sliced through the same rock. The story ahead connects those layers, ending with UNESCO's warning that this sacred city is now a World Heritage Site in danger. It might seem like just another historical district, but the old city of Jerusalem sits in one of the most watched, photographed, and debated spaces on the planet. As of the time of this video, 2025, it lies in an area administered by Israel, which considers all of Jerusalem its capital. The United Nations and UNESCO, however, treat East Jerusalem, including the Old City, as part of the occupied Palestinian territory and do not recognize unilateral changes to its status. For that reason, UNESCO does not assign the site to any specific country. It simply calls it the Old City of Jerusalem and its walls. Getting here usually means arriving at Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv. From there, the Old City is about an hour away by car or train, depending on the checkpoints and traffic. From Jordan, many arrive via the Allenby or King Hussein Bridge crossing and continue up into the hills toward Jerusalem. From above, the layout is clear. A near rectangular stone wall surrounds the city's ancient core, stretching about 4.5 kilometers in total length. Inside the walls lie four distinct quarters: Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and Armenian, each with its own history, traditions, and monuments. And surrounding the old city is the much larger and modern city of Jerusalem, with a mix of historical suburbs, government districts, and fast-growing residential zones. But the setting goes far beyond buildings. The old city sits in the southern Levant, on a plateau in the Judean mountains, on a ridge between two steep valleys, the Kidron and the Hinnom. A third, now mostly filled in, known as the Tyropoeon, once cut through the center. These valleys helped shape early defenses and routes, long before the walls we see today were built. A natural spring, the Gihon, made permanent settlement here possible. Geography is part of the story. The site offered visibility, protection, and access to trade routes. But the physical journey is the easy part. What makes this site unique is how much history, devotion, and tension is concentrated behind these walls. And it all starts with a question. Why did so many civilizations, and now the United Nations, decide that this one-walled ridge matters so much? Let's go back to the beginning. Long before kings, temples, or scriptures, this ridge in Jerusalem was already home to people. Archaeological traces show that by 4500 BCE, during the Chalcolithic period, small communities had settled near the Gihon Spring, one of the few reliable water sources in the region. They built basic dwellings and left behind pottery fragments, flint tools, and early signs of organized life. The site's location wasn't random. It sat on a natural ridge with steep valleys on both sides, offering protection from raids and floods, and nearby slopes could support small-scale farming and herding. But despite the evidence of early habitation, there's no sign of massive structures or fortifications yet. This was still a rural outpost, one of many scattered across the southern Levant. Over time, the settlement grew modestly in size and complexity. By the early Bronze Age, the community had expanded enough to leave traces of permanent architecture. It wasn't yet Jerusalem. There was no city wall, no palace, no temple. But the foundation, literally and symbolically, had been laid. And that raises a bigger question. What turns a small village near a spring into one of the most contested and sacred places on Earth? To begin answering that, we need to meet the people who controlled this ridge next, the Canaanites. Around 3000 BCE, waves of urbanization spread across the Levant. Regional elites began consolidating power into fortified hill towns, supported by agriculture, trade, and early cultic practices. This broader shift gave rise to the Canaanite culture, a group of city-states with shared languages, customs, and religious systems, spread across what is now Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Western Syria, and Jordan. Canaanites were not a single people, but a network of rival polities linked by trade, diplomacy, and occasional war. Their cities, like Hazor, Megiddo, and Shechem, grew around strong defensive positions and access to water. By the Middle Bronze Age, around 1800 BCE, evidence shows the construction of substantial fortifications, including a massive stone wall and towers, designed to protect the settlement and its access to the spring. The most impressive of these is the so-called Spring Tower, a 7-meter-wide defensive structure built directly above the water source. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered a silo-shaped shaft system, likely used to retrieve water from inside the city during times of siege. The inhabitants spoke a Northwest Semitic language and followed Canaanite religious traditions, worshipping local deities such as El, Baal, and Shalom, the god of dusk and peace, whose name may be embedded in the city's earliest form, Urusalim, or Rusalamum. These names appear in Egyptian execration texts from the 19th century BCE, the Ebal inscription, where the pharaoh's scribes listed rebellious cities by name, cursing them ritually. This is one of the earliest known references to Jerusalem in written form. By the 14th century BCE, Jerusalem appears again, this time in the Amarna letters, a cache of diplomatic correspondence between vassal kings and the Egyptian court. In these clay tablets, a local ruler named Abdi Heba pleads for military support as rival city-states threaten his rule. Yet even with this visibility, Jerusalem in the late Bronze Age was still modest in scale, likely no more than 1,500 to 2,000 inhabitants, confined to the narrow ridge above the spring. And by the end of the second millennium BCE, a new political force was rising in the Central Highlands. Tribes claiming descent from a man named Abraham were forming a loose confederation, and some of them had their eyes set on this hill. The next chapter belongs to the Jebusites, and to the man who would take their city and change its fate, David. By the early Iron Age, around 1200 BCE, Egyptian control over Canaan had weakened, and a power vacuum allowed dozens of local city-states to operate with relative independence. Among them was Jerusalem, now ruled by a people known in biblical tradition as the Jebusites. Little is known about the Jebusites from archaeology alone. They left behind no royal inscriptions or monumental temples. Most of what survives comes from layers of fortification and domestic architecture within the slope just outside the current old city walls. The Bible describes them as Canaanite descendants, possibly a subset of Amorites, who had retained control of the hill long after other territories fell to the highland tribes. Jerusalem at this stage was small, steep, and compact, barely 1/10 the size of today's old city. But sometime around 1000 BCE, that changed. The book of Samuel recounts how David, ruler of a tribal confederation based in Hebron, captured Jerusalem and made it his new capital. The move was strategic. The city was neutral ground between rival Israelite tribes and located far from old centers of power. The conquest, while dramatic in scripture, left few archaeological traces. There is no physical evidence of battle, only continuity in habitation. But what matters is what came after. David is said to have built a royal residence on the ridge and brought the Ark of the Covenant into the city. This act began Jerusalem's transformation from hilltop stronghold to sacred capital. And in the next generation, his son would cement that status by building a temple that would redefine the city forever. That's when Jerusalem becomes more than strategic. It becomes holy. Around 1000 BCE, Jerusalem shifted from a fortified ridge into the political heart of a new monarchy. David's reign marked the beginning of royal expansion, but it was Solomon, his son and successor, who elevated Jerusalem from political capital to religious center. According to biblical tradition, he launched an ambitious building program. On the northern hilltop, he constructed a royal palace complex and, at its core, the first temple, a sanctuary dedicated to Yahweh. It replaced local shrines and centralized worship in one place. The temple stood above the city on a flat, elevated platform, visible from every approach. The space around it became a zone of ritual, processions, and offerings, a sacred acropolis with both religious and political weight. Archaeological remains from the 10th to 9th centuries BCE in the city of David, such as large public buildings, stepped structures, and stronger fortifications, show that Jerusalem had grown beyond a simple hill village into a rising capital. While scholars debate how powerful or centralized the monarchy actually was compared to the biblical account, there is broad agreement that the city's administrative and religious importance increased significantly during this period. Sometime around 930 BCE, the unified kingdom split into two entities, primarily due to the harsh policies of King Solomon's son, Rehoboam. The Kingdom of Israel in the north, with its capital in Shechem or Samaria, and the Kingdom of Judah in the south, with Jerusalem as its capital. Historical and archaeological records confirm that the region faced external pressures soon after. In 925 BCE, Pharaoh Shishak I of Egypt, identified with the biblical Shishak, invaded the southern Levant. His campaign is recorded on temple walls at Karnak and lists cities across Canaan, though whether Jerusalem itself was captured remains uncertain. By the 9th century BCE, power struggles intensified. The Armenian kingdom of Damascus under King Hazael launched a series of successful raids into the region. According to both the Bible and independent sources, Hazael devastated parts of Judah and Israel. Some scholars believe he may have even taken control of Jerusalem briefly, though physical evidence is inconclusive. Meanwhile, religion in Judah was evolving. The Bible describes an official push toward monotheism centered on the Jerusalem temple. But archaeological finds suggest a more complex picture. Figurines linked to Asherah, a female deity, have been found in Judahite homes from the First Temple period, indicating that personal and household cults coexisted with state-sanctioned worship. Still, by the 8th century BCE, Jerusalem had clearly become the kingdom's primary, and possibly only, active shrine, drawing pilgrims from across the region. It was a city growing in importance, but surrounded by danger. And to the north, a new superpower was rising: Assyria. Their arrival would change Jerusalem's fate and test the strength of its walls, its kings, and its temple. By the late 8th century BCE, the Kingdom of Judah had become a buffer zone, wedged between two powerful rivals, the Neo-Assyrian Empire to the northeast and Egypt's 25th dynasty to the southwest, then ruled by Nubian pharaohs from Kush. Both powers sought control over the trade routes that cut through the southern Levant, and cities like Jerusalem were caught in the middle. Assyrian inscriptions from kings like Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, and Sennacherib describe a calculated campaign of dominance across the Levant. Cities that resisted were destroyed or absorbed. Local kings were expected to pay tribute and pledge loyalty, or face siege. Historical records confirm that Hezekiah, king of Judah, initially cooperated with Assyria. But sometime around 705 BCE, after Sargon's death, a regional revolt spread across the Levant, with support from Egypt, which was trying to reassert influence in the area. Judah joined the anti-Assyrian coalition, hoping Egypt's military backing would shift the balance. This miscalculation nearly cost Jerusalem everything. In 701 BCE, Sennacherib marched south to crush the rebellion. Assyrian records describe the conquest of 46 fortified cities in Judah, including the destruction of Lachish, now confirmed by excavations and reliefs from Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh. Jerusalem was spared, but not untouched. The Assyrians claimed to have surrounded the city and forced Hezekiah to pay heavy tribute, silver, gold, and valuables from the royal treasury and the temple. Behind the walls, evidence of emergency construction projects paints a vivid picture. Defensive reinforcements were added. The famous Siloam Tunnel, a 533-meter-long rock-cut channel, was likely completed during this time, securing access to water in case of siege. Its construction inscription, written in ancient Hebrew, still survives today. Despite submission, Judah remained unstable. Over the next decades, Assyrian power began to wane, and Egypt stepped back into the region, now under the rule of Psamtik I of the 26th dynasty. By the late 7th century BCE, Judah had become part of the Egyptian sphere of influence, sending troops and tribute in exchange for protection. Jerusalem's kings now walked a diplomatic tightrope, caught between crumbling Assyrian authority and Egyptian resurgence. And as both faded, a new power moved in from the east, Babylon. By the early 6th century BCE, under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon quickly took control of former Assyrian territories, moving westward to secure trade routes and regional dominance. Judah had aligned itself with Egypt during the power shift, likely hoping to resist Babylonian control. But in 597 BCE, after a failed revolt, Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah and captured Jerusalem. According to Babylonian administrative records, the Babylonian Chronicles, he deported King Jehoiakim, his court, and much of the city's elite to Babylon. A puppet king, Zedekiah, was installed in his place. But resistance didn't end. Less than a decade later, Judah rebelled again. In 587 or 586 BCE, Babylon returned, this time with full force. The siege lasted for months, cutting off supplies and breaking Jerusalem's defenses. Eventually, Babylonian troops entered the city, burned the temple, destroyed palaces, tore down defensive walls, and brought the First Temple period to a decisive end. This destruction is one of the few events mentioned in the Bible, Babylonian texts, and archaeological evidence. Layers of ash and debris found in multiple excavation sites in Jerusalem, including the City of David, match the date and scale of the event. The First Temple, originally built under Solomon and long seen as the national sanctuary, was gone. With it, the political independence of Judah also disappeared. A large portion of the population was exiled to Babylon, while others fled to neighboring regions or remained under imperial supervision. The destruction of the temple and the trauma of exile became central to Jewish religious identity. New forms of worship and scripture preservation began in diaspora. And when the political tide shifted again, Jerusalem would rise once more, rebuilt under a new empire, with a new kind of temple at its heart. But it would never be the same city again. The fall of Babylon in 539 BCE brought a dramatic shift, not just in empire, but in policy. The conqueror, Cyrus the Great of Persia, allowed exiled communities across his new territory to return to their homelands and restore their local temples. This included the Judeans exiled from Jerusalem, who had lived in Babylonian cities for nearly 50 years. According to Persian-era administrative records and echoed in biblical texts, Cyrus issued a decree, the Edict of Cyrus, permitting the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem and encouraging the return of sacred vessels looted decades earlier. While the precise wording of this decree is debated, the rebuilding process did begin during the early Persian period, likely under the supervision of returning elites supported by imperial authority. Reconstruction wasn't immediate or easy. The city remained in ruins, the walls were broken, and rival local populations opposed the project. Still, by 516 BCE, the Second Temple was completed. It was smaller and simpler than Solomon's original structure, but carried enormous symbolic weight. Jerusalem was once again a functioning religious center, even if its political role remained limited. During this time, Jerusalem was not an independent capital, but a provincial city within the Persian administrative system. Governors appointed by the Persian court oversaw civic life. One of the most notable was Nehemiah, a Judean official at the Persian court who obtained royal permission to return and rebuild the city's walls. There's archaeological support for a modest but functioning city in this period. Simple homes, restored infrastructure, and pottery layers consistent with Persian-era settlement. But Jerusalem remained small compared to its former size. And yet, the foundations laid during Persian rule, both physical and ideological, would shape the city's future. But peace wouldn't last long. To the west, a new empire was already rising, led by a young Macedonian general named Alexander. When Alexander the Great swept through the Near East in the late 4th century BCE, the Persian Empire collapsed, and Jerusalem changed hands once again. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his generals divided the empire. Jerusalem and the territory of Judah fell into the contested border between two successor states, the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria. For roughly a century, Jerusalem remained under Ptolemaic control, governed from Alexandria. The city was allowed to maintain religious practices centered on the Second Temple, and the high priesthood became the central institution of power. By 198 BCE, control of Jerusalem shifted again, this time to the Seleucid Empire after the Battle of Panium. And under Seleucid rule, the tension between Hellenistic imperial policies and local religious traditions began to escalate. Initially, Seleucid kings allowed the same degree of autonomy. But by the reign of Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes, everything changed. In 168 BCE, Antiochus imposed decrees aimed at unifying the empire under Greek cultural norms. Jewish religious practices were banned. The temple in Jerusalem was desecrated. An altar to Zeus was reportedly erected inside. These acts were seen not just as political domination, but as a direct assault on the city's sacred identity. The result was revolt. In 167 BCE, a priestly family from the town of Modi'in, led by Mattathias and later his son Judah Maccabee, launched a rebellion that quickly gained momentum. Known historically as the Hasmonean Revolt, or Maccabean Revolt, it was both a war for independence and a rejection of foreign-imposed religious policy. In 164 BCE, rebel forces, also known as Maccabees, retook Jerusalem and rededicated the Second Temple. This event is still commemorated today in the festival of Hanukkah. Over the following decades, the Hasmoneans consolidated power, expanding their territory and eventually establishing an independent kingdom with Jerusalem as its capital. The city may have regained its autonomy, but unity remained elusive. And the next time Jerusalem changed hands, it would be under Roman rule, permanently altering the trajectory of its temple and its people. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey marched into Jerusalem during a civil war between rival Hasmonean factions. From that point forward, Jerusalem became a client city under Roman control, with local rulers appointed or approved by the empire. The most powerful and controversial of these was Herod the Great, appointed king of Judea by the Roman Senate in 37 BCE. Herod understood the political value of Jerusalem and the symbolic power of the temple. In a calculated move to secure legitimacy, he launched one of the most ambitious construction projects in the city's history. Around 20 BCE, Herod began rebuilding the Second Temple on a monumental scale. Rather than simply renovating the existing sanctuary, he doubled the size of the platform, creating the massive esplanade known today as the Temple Mount. Retaining walls, including what is now the Western Wall, were built from enormous limestone blocks, some weighing over 400 tons. Herod's temple was considered one of the marvels of the Roman East. Gleaming white stone, golden roofs, and inner courts accessible only to priests. For the Jewish population, it remained the religious center of the world. For Herod, it was a political tool, a symbol of stability and grandeur under Roman favor. But Herod's building program extended far beyond the temple. In Jerusalem, he built fortresses, palaces, amphitheaters, and public plazas, bringing Roman architectural language into the cityscape. Despite these changes, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Many resented Herod's loyalty to Rome, his brutality toward rivals, and his manipulation of the high priesthood. The temple itself, though holy, was now surrounded by Roman garrisons and imperial symbolism. The priestly elite benefited from the system, but popular unrest continued to grow. By the time Herod died in 4 BCE, Jerusalem was a hybrid, a sacred city wrapped in Roman stone, ruled by foreign-backed kings and shaped by conflicting expectations. The Second Temple, rebuilt by Herod, stood as the monumental center of Jewish religious life. Pilgrims arrived from all over the Eastern Mediterranean for major festivals like Passover and Shavuot, and the city itself had grown into a dense, multicultural hub under Roman oversight. Amid this charged atmosphere, a new movement began to take shape. According to historical sources, both religious and secular, this was the period in which a Jewish teacher named Jesus of Nazareth gathered followers, preached in Galilee, and entered Jerusalem during a festival period. The exact year of his death is uncertain, but most historians place it between 30 and 33 CE, during the governorship of Pontius Pilate, a Roman official known for his harsh rule. While the Gospels focus on spiritual and theological aspects, historical readings place the movement around Jesus in the context of growing dissatisfaction with both Roman occupation and temple authority. His presence in Jerusalem during Passover, a time already charged with messianic expectations, was seen as politically risky. After his crucifixion, the movement didn't vanish. Small communities of followers began spreading his teachings throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, and over the next decades, Christianity emerged as a distinct current within the Jewish world, eventually separating into a new religious identity. Jerusalem remained central to this early phase. The city was home to some of the first Christian gatherings, possibly in private houses. At the time, few would have noticed the long-term consequences of this small sect. And the memory of Jerusalem as the place of Jesus' final days would become central not just to faith, but to global history. Yet politically, it was heading toward disaster. Because while new movements were taking root, older resentments were boiling over, and a full-scale revolt against Rome was just around the corner. Under Caligula in the 30s CE, tensions escalated. His insistence on placing imperial statues in Jewish temples sparked panic, nearly triggering revolt. Many scholars see this as the first open breach between Jews and Rome. By 66 CE, open war broke out. The First Jewish-Roman War, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, began with attacks on Roman garrisons and tax collectors. Jerusalem quickly became both a fortress and a battlefield. The Roman retaliation was swift and brutal. General Vespasian crushed resistance in the north before handing over command to his son Titus. In 70 CE, after a brutal siege, Roman forces breached Jerusalem's walls. The destruction was total. The Second Temple, centerpiece of Jewish religious life, was burned. Only its retaining walls remained, one of which, the Western Wall, still stands today. The city was left in ruins, its sacred spaces desecrated or flattened. But the Roman transformation of Jerusalem didn't end with fire and conquest. Around 130 CE, Emperor Hadrian initiated a new phase. Over the remains of the city, he established a Roman colony, Aelia Capitolina. This was not a reconstruction. It was a replacement. The Temple Mount became the site of a Roman temple to Jupiter. A statue of Hadrian himself may have stood nearby. Jewish access to the city was restricted. Pagan cults were promoted, and the urban layout was reorganized in the style of Roman grid planning. Hadrian's project erased the physical and symbolic core of ancient Jerusalem, at least in the eyes of Rome. And in this vacuum of ruins and restrictions, something unexpected took root. A new religion, born from Jewish traditions but now expanding beyond Judea, would start to see Jerusalem in a different light. By the early 2nd century, small Christian communities had emerged across the eastern Mediterranean. Though still illegal, Christianity spread steadily, often underground. That changed dramatically in 312 CE, when Constantine the Great began favoring the faith after his rise to power. A year later, the Edict of Milan legalized Christianity across the empire, reshaping the religious landscape of Rome. In 324 to 325 CE, Constantine defeated his last rivals and became sole emperor. That same year, the First Council of Nicaea was held, and Jerusalem, still known formally as Aelia Capitolina, was elevated to the status of a patriarchate, confirming its growing religious stature. A wave of Christian immigration followed, and from this point on, historical sources increasingly returned to calling the city by its ancient name, Jerusalem. The most transformative moment came with Empress Helena, Constantine's mother. During her pilgrimage to the Levant, she identified what were believed to be the key sites of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. These locations became sacred landmarks. In 335 CE, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was consecrated on the site believed to house both Golgotha and Jesus' tomb. It rapidly became the heart of Christian pilgrimage. Under successive Byzantine emperors, Jerusalem took on a new form. Pagan temples were removed or converted. A network of monasteries, churches, and pilgrimage routes took shape, extending from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane. By the time of Theodosius I, who in 380 CE declared Nicene Christianity the official religion of the empire, Jerusalem had become a spiritual center of growing global influence. Despite the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Byzantine control of Jerusalem continued, bringing a mix of investment and rising tensions. Major works like Justinian's Nia Church, completed in the 6th century, reflected the city's elevated status. But that prestige came with internal religious conflict. Rival Christian denominations, imperial politics, and deep-rooted tensions with the Jewish community created a volatile atmosphere. And beyond the horizon, a new faith was emerging. By 610 CE in Arabia, the revelations received by Muhammad introduced Islam, and during its earliest years, Jerusalem became the first Qibla, the initial direction of Muslim prayer. Though the Qibla would later shift toward Mecca, Jerusalem's spiritual significance in Islam was already taking root. By this point, the city had become a unique focal point for the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each assigning profound meaning to its hills, shrines, and stones. That shared reverence would become both a symbol of coexistence and a source of enduring conflict. In 638 CE, just a few years after the death of Prophet Muhammad, Jerusalem was captured by the forces of the Rashidun Caliphate, led by Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab. According to multiple historical sources, the surrender of the city was secured peacefully, following an agreement with the Christian patriarch Sophronius. Umar himself is said to have entered the city humbly, respecting its religious diversity and safeguarding Christian holy sites. This moment marked a profound shift. For the first time in centuries, Jerusalem was no longer under Roman or Byzantine rule, and a new religious tradition had begun to shape its identity. By the early 8th century, under the Umayyad Caliphate, this transformation became visible in stone, a dynasty we also explored in our video on the Alhambra, one of the last great legacies of Muslim rule in Spain. Around 691 CE, the Dome of the Rock was completed on the Temple Mount, known in Arabic as Haram al-Sharif. For Muslims, the rock was believed to be the place from which Muhammad ascended to heaven during the Isra and Miraj, a night journey described in Islamic tradition. But its significance was also intertwined with earlier faiths. In Jewish tradition, the rock was associated with the binding of Isaac and the location of the ancient temples. Soon after, the nearby Al-Aqsa Mosque was constructed, forming together with the Dome of the Rock, the sacred complex that still dominates the plateau today. They marked Jerusalem as a key city within the Islamic world, alongside Mecca and Medina. While Islamic influence deepened, reflected in the urban fabric, administration, and legal structures, Christians and Jews were generally allowed to live in the city and maintain their places of worship under the dhimmi system. By the end of the 11th century, Jerusalem had become both a crossroads and a pressure point, and soon it would become the target of armies marching under the banner of a cross. In 1054, the Great Schism formalized the split between Eastern and Western Christianity. The Patriarch of Jerusalem sided with the Eastern Orthodox Church, bringing all Christians in the region under Constantinople's jurisdiction. This ecclesiastical realignment would later become one of the motivations behind Western intervention. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire was under pressure. In 1071, it suffered a devastating defeat to the Seljuk Turks at the Battle of Manzikert, losing much of Anatolia. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, struggling to hold the Eastern Front, sent envoys westward with a request for military help. Pope Urban II seized the moment. In 1095, at the Council of Clermont, Urban made his now famous call. Christians in the West were urged to take up arms and march to Jerusalem. His speech painted a vivid picture of Eastern Christians suffering under Muslim rule, of desecrated holy sites, and of a chance for eternal salvation through battle. It wasn't just war. It was framed as an armed pilgrimage, one that would unite Christendom under papal leadership. The promise of forgiveness for those who died in battle electrified the response. The First Crusade was soon underway, led by a mix of nobles and knights, including Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond IV of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, and Tancred of Hauteville, and drawing forces from France, Flanders, the Holy Roman Empire, and southern Italy, the campaign faced years of hardship before reaching Jerusalem. When they finally arrived in 1099, the siege was brutal. After a week of fighting, Crusaders breached the walls and stormed the city. What followed was one of the bloodiest episodes in Jerusalem's history. From this conquest rose the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, with the city as its capital. Crusader rule restructured Jerusalem. Mosques were turned into churches, religious relics were moved, and Latin Christian clergy replaced Eastern Orthodox ones. The Dome of the Rock was briefly consecrated as a Christian church, and while Jerusalem became a symbol of Christian victory, it remained surrounded by powerful Muslim dynasties, many of them increasingly united under a common goal to reclaim the city. The year was 1187, and the Crusader hold over Jerusalem was beginning to crack. Its greatest test came with the rise of one man, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known in the West simply as Saladin. A skilled military leader and shrewd political unifier, Saladin had consolidated control over Egypt and Syria under the Ayyubid dynasty, creating a powerful Islamic front. He championed the idea of jihad not only as a spiritual struggle, but as a military obligation to reclaim lands held by the Crusaders. In July of 1187, his army faced the Crusader forces near the Sea of Galilee at the Battle of Hattin. The result was devastating for the Crusaders. Their army was destroyed, their leaders captured, and the road to Jerusalem lay open. That October, Saladin reached the city, but instead of launching an all-out assault like the Crusaders had in 1099, he offered terms. After brief resistance, the Christian defenders surrendered. This time, no massacres followed. Saladin allowed most residents to buy their freedom and even permitted Eastern Christian communities to remain. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque were rededicated as Muslim holy sites, but Christian churches, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, were left standing. Saladin's capture of Jerusalem sent shockwaves through Europe. In the years that followed, Saladin's successors continued to govern Jerusalem under the Ayyubid banner. But the calm wouldn't last. The Crusaders weren't done yet, and Jerusalem's walls would once again echo with the noise of war. In 1229, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II negotiated a remarkable deal during the Sixth Crusade. Without a single battle, he secured Christian control over parts of Jerusalem through a treaty with Al-Kamil, Saladin's nephew. Muslims retained authority over the Haram al-Sharif, while Christians governed other districts. The city, for a brief moment, belonged to both. But in 1244, disaster struck. The Khwarezmians, displaced by the Mongol invasions of Central Asia and allied with Egyptian forces, stormed Jerusalem, massacred Christian inhabitants, and damaged holy sites, including parts of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The blow was final. The Crusaders never regained the city. In the years that followed, Jerusalem became part of the Mamluk Sultanate, a military regime that would dominate the region for centuries. The Mamluks saw Jerusalem primarily as a religious city, not a political capital, and focused on restoring mosques, madrasas, and Sufi shrines, rather than fortifying the city for imperial defense. Even so, conflict remained close. In 1260, the Mongol Empire reached Palestine for the first time, pushing into the Levant as part of their westward expansion. Further Mongol raids followed in 1300, led by Ghazan Khan and Mulay, with Jerusalem reportedly held for 4 months, a brief and chaotic episode sometimes linked to the Ninth Crusade. The city, though spared total destruction, faced waves of instability. Then came a new and invisible threat. In 1347, the Black Death swept through the Mamluk Sultanate, reaching Jerusalem with devastating consequences. Entire quarters were abandoned. Pilgrimage slowed to a trickle. Still, through centuries of siege and survival, its walls endured. And soon, a new power from Anatolia would reshape them completely. In 1517, after a swift campaign through the Levant, Jerusalem fell under Ottoman control, part of a much broader expansion that brought the region into one of the world's longest-lasting empires. The conquest, led by Sultan Selim I, marked the start of over 4 centuries of Ottoman rule, which would leave a deep and visible mark on the city's skyline. But it was under his son, Suleiman the Magnificent, that Jerusalem saw its most enduring transformation. He ordered a full rebuilding of the city's fortifications. The result was the massive stone walls that still encircle the old city today, over 4 kilometers long, with 34 watchtowers and 8 gates. Construction was completed around 1541, with major entry points like the Damascus Gate, Jaffa Gate, and Zion Gate anchoring key access routes. Inside the city, Suleiman also invested in infrastructure for pilgrims, rebuilding aqueducts, refurbishing mosques, and enhancing access to key shrines. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, Jerusalem thrived not as a political capital, but as a symbolic heart of faith. Pilgrims from across the empire, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish, continued to arrive in waves. Despite outbreaks of plague and intermittent conflict, the Ottomans provided a stability that the city hadn't experienced in generations. By the 1800s, however, that stability began to fray. European interest in the Holy Land grew sharply, alongside new missions, consulates, and archaeological expeditions. Still, the work done in the 16th century by Suleiman's architects and planners endured. The walls they built remain the clearest physical boundary of the old city today. They are now part of what defines Jerusalem as a World Heritage Site, and they would be the last great fortifications before a new era of global empires, colonial interests, and the next wave of seismic change. In December 1917, British forces captured Jerusalem after defeating the Ottomans at the Battle of Jerusalem during the First World War, marking the end of 4 centuries of Ottoman control. General Edmund Allenby entered the city on foot through the Jaffa Gate, an intentional gesture of reverence. Just weeks earlier, The Balfour Declaration had been issued, expressing British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. These two moments would shape the region's future. In 1922, the League of Nations formally granted Britain the Mandate for Palestine, a legal and political framework that gave the British administrative control over the territory. It aimed to facilitate both the development of a Jewish homeland and the protection of civil and religious rights for all inhabitants. Meanwhile, demographic pressure increased. Waves of Jewish immigration accelerated throughout the 1920s and 30s, particularly with the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. Tensions escalated, and by 1920, the first major outbreak of violence occurred, the Nebi Musa riots. Triggered during a religious procession, these clashes marked the first large-scale skirmish of the Arab-Israeli conflict. From 1936 to 1939, the Arab Revolt shook the mandate against both British rule and Jewish immigration. By the 1940s, Britain found itself unable to contain the spiraling conflict. In 1947, the United Nations General Assembly approved a partition plan that would divide mandatory Palestine into two independent states, one Jewish, one Arab, with Jerusalem designated as an international city, separate from either side. But the plan never materialized as intended. As soon as the British withdrew in May 1948, Jerusalem was thrust into war. The Arab-Israeli War erupted in full force, and the city, so often fought over through the centuries, was once again a battlefield. West Jerusalem became the heart of the newly declared State of Israel, while East Jerusalem, including the entire Old City, came under the control of Jordan. The 1949 Armistice Agreement formalized the split. In June 1967, after just 3 days after the Six-Day War, Israeli forces entered the Old City and declared a unified Jerusalem as its capital and extended civil jurisdiction over East Jerusalem. But the unification was far from simple. Israel's swift military victory led to global debate. The UN Security Council, through Resolution 242, called for the withdrawal from territories occupied during the conflict, including East Jerusalem. Most countries, following UN policy, declined to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the eastern part of the city. To this day, Jerusalem remains one of the most diplomatically contested cities in the world. On the ground, however, major changes began. Israeli authorities expanded municipal boundaries, annexing surrounding villages and suburbs into what is now known as Greater Jerusalem. Access to holy sites was officially guaranteed. In 1980, Israel passed the Jerusalem Law, affirming the city as its complete and united capital. The UN and many member states responded with Resolution 478, declaring the law null and void. Most foreign embassies that had remained in West Jerusalem relocated to Tel Aviv, reflecting the ongoing refusal to recognize unilateral claims over the city. Despite the political tension, Jerusalem's population doubled over these decades, becoming increasingly diverse and complex. Between 1987 and the early 1990s, the First Intifada, a widespread Palestinian uprising that combined civil disobedience, mass protests, and violent attacks in the occupied territories and Israel, further strained relations and showed how contested the question of control over the city had become. The 1993 Oslo Accords brought a temporary sense of optimism, as negotiations over Jerusalem's status became part of a broader peace process. But progress was slow and fragile. By the early 2000s, the dream of a shared solution for Jerusalem had dimmed. Hopes sparked by the Oslo Accords gave way to renewed violence with the outbreak of the Second Intifada in 2000, which saw deadly clashes across the city. In 2017, the United States officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and later relocated its embassy from Tel Aviv. A few other countries followed suit, but the vast majority of the international community, including the United Nations, continues to view East Jerusalem as occupied territory, pending a negotiated settlement between Israelis and Palestinians. Today, the Old City still brings together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities, each keeping its own festivals, rituals, and daily rhythms inside the same walls. Markets, prayers, and processions share space with headlines about protests, security, and access to holy sites. It remains a small patch of stone where living traditions, deep memories, and unresolved tensions continue to meet every day. The Old City may cover only about 1 square kilometer, but in that small space it concentrates some of the most visited religious sites on the planet. Some places draw global crowds and hours-long queues. Others sit almost unnoticed in side alleys. Together they explain why this walled rectangle is far more than just a historic center. At the eastern edge of the Old City rises the platform that concentrates more meaning per square meter than almost anywhere else on Earth. The Temple Mount, known in Arabic as Haram al-Sharif. This elevated esplanade was once the site of the first and second Jewish temples and is now home to the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, forming the heart of one of Islam's most revered sanctuaries. For Jews, this is the traditional location of Solomon's Temple and the Holy of Holies, the spiritual center of ancient worship. For Muslims, it is the place from which the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven during the night journey, and it served as the first direction of prayer in early Islam. For many Christians, it preserves the memory of the temple visited in the time of Jesus. 3 faiths, 3 layers of devotion, stacked on the same stone plateau. This is the place where theology, archaeology, memory, and modern politics meet in one open square. It looks like a peaceful platform, but every line of stone comes with a debate. Just below the Temple Mount, on its western side, stands the Western Wall, a retaining wall built in the time of Herod the Great to expand the temple platform. Today, it is the most accessible place where Jews can pray close to the former temple site, and it has become a central symbol for Jewish worship and national memory. The open plaza in front of the wall is rarely empty. Visitors see people inserting small folded notes into the cracks, reading psalms, or marking life events like bar and bat mitzvahs. It is both a local synagogue and a global meeting point. What is visible outside, though, is only a short section of a much longer structure. The Western Wall tunnels reveal the continuation of the wall northward, hidden beneath later streets and houses. Guided tours take visitors through underground arches, water channels, and pavements from the Second Temple period, with some stones weighing hundreds of tons. On the southern side of the platform lies the Jerusalem Archaeological Park, Davidson Center. Here, excavations have exposed monumental staircases, marketplace streets, mikvaot, ritual baths, and collapsed stones from the Roman destruction of 70 CE. From this area, it is easier to visualize how crowded and intense the temple complex must have been at its peak, with pilgrims arriving from all over the Mediterranean world. In the northwest of the Old City, the Christian quarter centers on one enormous, irregular church complex, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. For many Christian traditions, this is the site of the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The interior feels more like a small city than a single sanctuary. Stairs, galleries, domes, and side chapels layered one over another. Pilgrims line up at the Stone of Anointing, touch the rock of Golgotha, and circle the edicule that surrounds the traditional tomb. Leading toward the Holy Sepulchre is the Via Dolorosa, a route marked by stations recalling the Passion of Christ. Whether or not this exact alignment matches first-century streets, processions have followed it for centuries. Along the way are points like the Ecce Homo Arch, the Lithostrotos pavement, and the courtyards of different convents and churches that anchor the route. The quarter also holds other important sites. Lutheran Church of the Redeemer, with its bell tower views over the Old City. St. Anne's Church and the Pools of Bethesda, often highlighted for their acoustics and archaeological layers. The Muristan Market, filling former Crusader spaces with modern cafes and shops. Just outside the walls, places like the Garden Tomb offer an alternative Protestant tradition for the burial and resurrection site. And the Mount of Olives churches, including the Church of All Nations and Church of Mary Magdalene, frame the Old City from a distance. These can be mentioned as nearby extensions of the Christian landscape, even though they sit beyond the UNESCO core. In the southeast of the Old City, the Jewish quarter combines active religious life with some of the clearest archaeological time windows in Jerusalem. Many structures here were destroyed in 1948 and rebuilt after 1967, which gave planners a chance to excavate and then integrate the finds into modern streets. The Herva Synagogue, repeatedly destroyed and rebuilt across the centuries, now stands as a prominent landmark, with a large dome rising above the rooftops. Nearby, the 4 Sephardic synagogues preserve the atmosphere of the pre-modern Jewish community, with prayer halls reflecting Ottoman and Mediterranean styles. Sites like Tiferet Yisrael Synagogue and the Karaite Heritage Center add further layers to the story of Jewish worship in the quarter. Below street level, the quarter becomes a history lesson in 3 dimensions. The Herodian Quarter, also known as the Wohl Archaeological Museum, reveals large priestly houses from the late Second Temple period, complete with mosaics, storerooms, and ritual baths. The reconstructed Cardo, a colonnaded north-south street, gives a sense of how Byzantine and later Crusader Jerusalem looked at ground level, with shops lining the covered walkways. The Armenian Quarter, in the southwest, is the smallest and quietest of the 4. It has been home to an Armenian community for more than 1,500 years, making it one of the oldest continuous Armenian diasporas in the world. The heart of the quarter is the Armenian Patriarchate and the compound of St. James Cathedral. Behind high walls lie cloisters, courtyards, workshops, and a renowned tradition of Armenian ceramic tile work. Compared to the busy markets of the Muslim Quarter or the crowds near the Western Wall, this district feels more inward-facing, almost monastic. In the northeast of the Old City, the Muslim Quarter is the most densely populated and one of the most intense to walk through. Life spills straight into the streets, children playing in alleys, vendors calling out prices, and the sound of the muezzin echoing between stone walls. Hidden above and behind the shops are madrasas, historic lodgings, and Mamluk-era buildings, many with ornate stonework and carved inscriptions that most visitors only notice on a second or third visit. As a whole, the Muslim Quarter is less about a single landmark and more about the feeling of a living neighborhood wrapped around some of the most important holy ground on earth. Near the Jaffa Gate, the Tower of David Museum and Citadel form one of the most recognizable silhouettes on the western edge of the Old City. Inside, exhibitions trace roughly 4,000 years of Jerusalem's history, using the fortress itself as a backdrop. From the ramparts and towers, The view opens over both the old city and the growing modern neighborhoods outside the walls. From here, it is an easy narrative jump to the Ramparts Walk, a path that lets visitors walk along the top of the Ottoman walls for several kilometers. The northern and southern sections offer very different perspectives, one overlooking the Muslim quarter and East Jerusalem hills, the other facing Mount Zion, the Jewish quarter, and the Valley of Hinnom. The walls are punctuated by a series of gates that double as natural chapter breaks in the story. Jaffa Gate, the main western entrance and meeting point for many tours. Damascus Gate, with its impressive defensive facade and lively market below. Zion Gate, carrying bullet marks from 1948 fighting. Dung Gate, closest to the western wall. Lions Gate, known for its role in the 1967 entry of Israeli forces into the Old City. New Gate and Flowers Gate, later additions on the northern side. The Golden Gate, sealed for centuries on the eastern wall, facing the Mount of Olives. Each gate has its own history and symbolism. Beyond the famous shrines and monuments, much of the old city experience happens in between them, in the markets, side streets, and small squares where residents actually live and work. The Souk Khan al-Zayt, butcher's market, perfume market, goldsmith's market, and the cotton market, Souk el-Katanin, link the quarters with dense corridors of shops, food stalls, and workshops. These markets date back to Mamluk and Ottoman times and still function as commercial arteries today. Scattered through the alleys are smaller landmarks, hospices like the Austrian hospice, offering rooftop views. Historic fountains, sables, like those near the Lions Gate and on Haggai Street, once vital for travelers and residents alike. Sacred sites may draw people in. Daily life is what keeps the city running. In 1981, the Old City of Jerusalem and its walls were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage list. The nomination came from Jordan, which had administered the area until 1967, and was accepted based on the site's exceptional cultural significance to multiple civilizations, faiths, and historical epochs. UNESCO used 3 criteria for its inscription. Criterion 2, for its influence on architecture, urban planning, and religious traditions across cultures and continents. Criterion 3, for bearing unique testimony to the world's 3 monotheistic religions and their millennia-long presence in the city. Criterion 6, for its direct association with events, living traditions, and beliefs of universal significance. In simple terms, this was not just a historic city. It was a crossroads of human civilization, layered with meaning, memory, and global heritage. But unlike most UNESCO sites, which are clearly under one country's jurisdiction, Jerusalem's Old City has a complex and contested status. Because of the unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the city's international sensitivities, UNESCO does not list it under any national sovereignty. Instead, the entry reads, "Site proposed by Jordan." That diplomatic phrasing reflects the site's reality. Claimed, governed, and inhabited by many, yet universally valued. It also complicates conservation efforts. Projects like restoring ancient walls or managing visitor access often involve multiple religious authorities, local residents, the Jerusalem municipality, and international oversight, all with overlapping or competing claims. In 1982, UNESCO placed the Old City on its list of World Heritage in danger, citing rapid urban development, archaeological tensions, and the lack of a formal conservation framework that included all stakeholders. That status remains in place to this day. Jerusalem's old city holds more history than some entire countries. Every stone tells a story of empires that came and went, of faiths that still shape billions of lives, and of a place that never stopped being sacred. We've walked through layers of time, from the Canaanites to the Romans, from Crusaders to Ottomans, from ancient walls to modern tensions. And yet, it's not just about the past. The old city still pulses with life. Markets buzz, bells ring, prayers rise, and memories are made daily within its walls. If you've walked those narrow alleys, visited its holy sites, or stood in the shadow of its gates, we'd love to hear your story. And if Jerusalem is still on your list, tell us. What draws you in? Is it the history, the architecture, the faith, or simply the atmosphere? Leave a comment, and let's turn this into a shared journey. And while you're here, the next chapter of this World Heritage adventure is already on your screen. Another site, another layer of humanity, waiting to be explored.